Okay. Now, do human the no, I will
From that great age of Trek in the 1990s. Did Dr. Crusher and Picard ever get together? Does Geordi LaForge ever get his own command? Did Captain Sisko ever return from his sojourn with the Prophets? Has Bajor finally entered the Federation? Whatever happened to those Janeway Paris salamander babies? So many questions. Shall we begin?
Commander Data. He was an android.
Like the ones who attacked Mars?
You are killing innocent people.
In The High Ground, the Starfleet characters, and by extension the audience, can see both sides of this conflict, even if they have a problem reconciling the two. They look down on terrorism and sympathize with it and condemn it, all with the same haughty attitude. This complicated perspective is on display specifically in this scene, which prevented this episode from being broadcast in the British Isles. The scene directly references the then contemporary Northern and through her, we are taught to view Cardassian actions in a negative light.
I served the Federation.
His own command. Did Captain Sisko ever return from his sojourn with the Prophets? Has Bajor finally entered the Federation? Whatever happened to those Janeway Paris salamander babies? So many questions. Shall we begin? Star Trek Picard Season 1 makes Star Trek Nemesis a whole franchise, and it is a effects and complex cinematic-looking imagery. It certainly makes the source material look like a relic of the past.
What can influence it? Thank you, Mr. Data. You are welcome, sir.
We have nothing but love for how the final image characters visit strange new worlds in this new versus, well, Cave Planet number 47. And the performances are just seem dramatic. Many of the other actors give us convincing work as well. Then there's some joy to seeing their species and culture expanded. Gone is the flat, monocultural representation. Now we have Romulans who are refugees, Romulans who are space ninjas, Romulans who are profiting from dismantling Borg drones. There are, it seems, more than one Romulan phenotype, too. This is a lovely touch. Did I mention the space ninjas? And importantly, we get an update on the situation after the Romulan star went supernova, mentioned in the 2009 film Star Trek. This is all a lot of us wanted, ever since Star Trek Discovery was first announced several years ago, to pick up where we left off. And we do. So that's nice. Perhaps the most important update to the Romulans is that of Zhaban and Laris, Picard's doting housekeepers. In a franchise where Romulans are constantly duplicitous, constantly to be second-guessed, never to be trusted, it is refreshing to have a pair of Romulans, played very well by Orla Brady and Jamie McShane, that offer a new turn, a contrast that trends towards complexity. Characters of Picard. The show starts out very strongly, trumpeting several themes. It is a Star Trek tradition. Data's family is almost as weird and melodramatic as Spock's family. It is a Star Trek droids that might be related to Data. We even get to meet an organic brother, which is nice. Data's family, Data, rather felt some made destroy. As a fan, that felt like a little slice of home. It was perfect. And Kestra is exactly problem solved. The three of them all waiting. Exactly the payoff we were. This is exactly the thing for which we were all waiting. Exactly the payoff we were too scared to admit to hoping for. When the three of them, Will, Deanna, and Jean-Luc, were all sitting at the dinner table problem solving together. Well, as a fan, that felt like a little slice of home. It was perfect. Weird extended family of Dr. Noonien and Soong. It rather felt spot on in a story about androids that might be related to Data. We even get to meet an organic brother, which is nice. Data's family is almost as weird and melodramatic as Spock's family. It is a Star Trek tradition at this point, and it added a little flair of normalcy in this opening season of Picard. The show starts cap that would take on Jean-Luc. When you are married to your job that hard, so hard that it crowds out your personal life, what does that look like when you are retired? However, the show muddled those themes. Like when Picard's death ended up not being so permanent, which takes the theme of standing up for what is right and bumps it right into the theme of what it means to be human. And, well, just, it didn't really mix all that well. They overshadowed each other in all the wrong ways. Overall, if I pushes the narrative so that it feels rushed in many places. So much so that there are several unanswered questions. Like, what happened to Narek? Was he arrested? Did he change sides? Is he dead? And why are some of Picard's decisions seemingly so bad? Like in this scene, after Picard talks Seven out of killing Bjhazel, he lets her beam back down fully armed only minutes later. It's then that Seven continues on her rampage. What does Picard think will happen when he lets Seven have those weapons? Isn't he smarter than this?
Murder. Is not justice.
Burnham.
Human. What counts as a real life? It was interesting to see Picard so hampered by his wounded pride. As a viewer, I've often, having not gone after Data back when he was creating just wasn't fully explored. It went unexplored because the story didn't let itself have time to talk about it. You see, Picard is a man who championed is that the world simply gets better, and that we earn our way to that better life. Except that it doesn't get better. In this future, Raffi is poor. There also seems to be a working class, too, that gets stuck with bad scheduling. Poverty is a real thing that can happen to people on Earth in the late 24th century, which doesn't seem to gel with the paradise that humanity supposedly created for itself. Raffi chastises Picard for hiding away on his chateau, while she is ostracized out of Starfleet and left to remain at her humble trailer at Vasquez Rocks. This recontextualizes several things. First, it indicates that the Los Angeles County Department of Parks and Recreation, which runs Vasquez Rocks, is letting people live in the park in the 24th century. That's nice. But seriously, this tells us that Earth isn't some kind of paradise after all. That the economic Gilded Age style problems that plague Earth in our own 21st century will plague Earth in the future also. It also remakes Starfleet, the organization dedicated to exploration and to defending the Federation. Previously, Starfleet felt like a representative of Earth, as an example of how things are. Back home, of the successful strides that humanity took to make life better. Now, just with the knowledge that economic disparity could not be curtailed back home, Starfleet seems more like a special, isolated case. Like how the U.S. Army is sort of a mini-socialist state that runs counter to the grain of the larger capitalist U.S. empire. Like a secular Salvation Army that has teeth, and a fixation on repeating the Lewis and Clark expedition. Or maybe Picard and Raffi exist in an economic system where reputation is more important than actual currency. If so, then why didn't the show address this? Another thing to be discussed in this vein is Raffi's drug addiction and alcohol. Alcoholism. Isn't that substance dependent? Which is a disease, and as such, with all the whiz-bang gadgets and the newfangled technologies of the 24th century, isn't addiction a treatable, even a curable disorder? And while Star Trek is often the source of some quite magical technologies, warp drive and energy shields come to mind, Saga's tool, which Picard and Jurati use in the final battle, is inconsistent.
So good too. We
even with Trek's magical track record. It can repair the Las Arenas intermix chamber and trick an entire Romulan fleet.
There's no kind of trigger or switch.
Are we sure this device wasn't supposed to be John Delancey? playing the character of Q. And one more thing about world building, or rather about the themes going on in the background. Isn't it weird how Rafi, played by the lone African-American actress on the cast, is the one person addicted to drugs in the story? Isn't that a tired trope by now? Or how Jean-Luc Picard, the alpha white male leading character, is, by the end of the show, transformed into a member of a persecuted minority. It's a bit like Avatar, or Dances with Wolves, or something. It's understandable how these weren't intentional decisions, but that the circumstances of the story allowed for them to happen shows a lack of forethought, or at the very least a missed opportunity to engage with the very reason is why these tropes should be handled with care. Regardless, no matter what kind of story you're trying to tell, the key is in the delivery of it. So let's examine the delivery of this show, this story, and see how it stacks up. In terms of the delivery or the presentation, there are several elements that detract from the overall emotions that showrunners want you to feel. For one, the show is consistently overscored. Even if the score is very lovely, which it is. The effect steps on the performances of actors in multiple scenes. An example of this can be found in the pilot, during the interview between the reporter and Picard.
Well, today is a solemn day.
Questions as if the reporter is delivering blows. You can see him squirming in his chair. You can see the satisfaction on the reporter's face when she lands one of those blows. All of this is evident like it's to 11, the explosions and murder and such. This interview scene should have played with little to no underlying score. It might have, ironically, made the whole moment more shots from Zhaban and Laris.
Why did you really worry?
Not to say that the act like this one. This scene is more emotionally intense than the interview. It is a fateful meeting that sets the whole adventure in motion. But scoring like this for every scene that sets the whole adventure in motion. But scoring like this for every scene dulls the senses and works counter to the experience score. Enterprise D. That was a good moment for some nostalgia. But doing it repeatedly can be exhausting. Yes, we know who these characters are. That's why we're here. Camera movement on the show is very much like that of its predecessor, Star Trek Discovery. It is dialed into a specific formula of action-adventure visual.
um,
Star Trek Discovery. It is dialed into a specific formula of action-adventure visual storytelling. Specific instances felt fine and lined up with what characters are saying and doing, with how the audience is meant to be feeling. Like in the opening dream sequence of the pilot episode. Right when Picard's dream begins to turn upside down, so does the camera. The camera and the story are speaking in unison. But more often, the camera craft, like the score, drowned out actor performances and ran over top of other artistic ingredients. For example, in this scene of Picard and Soji talking about Data, the camera is in constant motion, with no variation, no start or finish. It doesn't seem to be connected to what the characters are feeling, but instead seem to be connected to a specific visual style to which the show is aiming, irrespective of character. We see the same thing in Star Trek Discovery, in scenes like this one, the camera seems to be flying around the room during a simple staff meeting. Now, context is everything, and you may well be saying, aren't you taking this specific camera move out of context? That is possible, and it is important to note that despite all the money flying around, $8 to $9 million per episode for Picard, that this is an art form that is a completely subjective experience. But all the same, let's consider an example from previously in the franchise, from a Next Generation episode called Ensign Ro. In this episode, we get a moment where the character Ro Laren is coming clean to Captain Picard, and in that moment, she spills her guts on the reasonings behind her actions, which is a very personal admission for her. What does the camera do? It spends about 90 seconds slowly getting closer and closer to Ro, as her admission gets more and more personal. It keeps this up until the camera is in a close-up on Ro, just as her deepest truth is revealed.
I don't want to be ashamed of my heritage any longer, Captain.
The camera move is perfectly matched to the emotion and action of the scene. It is so subtle that you don't notice what the camera's doing, because you're too busy feeling the emotion of the scene, the emotion of the performance. Camera and performance are speaking in unison. The camera's goal is the same as the speech. You are getting closer to Ro as a person, literally. That's cinematic. Star Trek Picard and its cousin Star Trek Discovery don't have a lot of that kind of subtlety, by design. We'll get back to the idea that Picard and Discovery share the same style of camera work, and how they directly to him. And given his inhuman experience with the Borg, in which he was assimilated against his will, in which his body was riddled with cold, intrusive technologies, suddenly waking up as an android should stir some difficult PTSD-style memories. He was robbed of his humanity, and without his consent. Any of us would have a difficult time with that. From a starting point such as this, Picard could have spent all of Season 1 searching out Soji and fighting the synth ban in an effort to rediscover his own lost humanity. The story practically writes itself, and it is a very sci-fi kind of kind of story, too. The evil mustache-twirling, weirdly sexualized Romulan villains are par for the course for Star Trek, which is to say poor. The franchise is notorious for giving life to terrible villains. The motivations of these new villains don't make much sense, except as a kind of Romulan Luddite movement, which is never really discussed beyond their need to kill sentient tech. Perhaps a better use of villainy here would be a simple Romulan plot to grab control of synthetics to hurt the Federation, as a matter of jManning of the Classic Flicks YouTube channel suggests some other, smaller changes that might result in a better story overall, using the very same elements we saw in the first season. Put Dahj's call to her mom before she meets Picard, instead of having her track down Picard twice. Have Data's paintings both at Picard's house. The only reason they are kept at a virtual storage unit is so Dahj can track him there. Picard's realization of the painting's meaning can still happen without the extra scene. Casual bigotry among Federation citizens is silly. It would make for better dramatic tension if we saw the synths being actually accepted by the workers. Trust in the synths makes the betrayal a bigger deal. Having the humans hate the synths already gives the audience a sense that they had it coming. In Dahj's apartment, Laris's use of molecular re-imaging is unnecessary. Just have them go through Dahj's computer records. If there was a murder or a missing person on Earth, why isn't it breaking news? Why aren't the authorities looking for Soji? Let us know that drastic actions have drastic consequences. Should Dahj be a suspect in her boyfriend's murder? Yes, she should. Don't take a cab to Rafi's. Cab should not be a thing. Transport there. Picard should be instantly suspicious of Dr. Jurati when she shows up demanding to go on the adventure with him, because an attentive audience is suspicious of her. Waiting for the characters to play catch-up with the audience can ruin tension. Don't send Picard on the secret space pirate mission. He's famous. Like, really famous. You would recognize President Barack Obama if he were acting like a silly space pirate, wouldn't you? During the humanity dialogue exchange between Seven and Picard, have Picard blow cover and beam down to Seven to talk her out of it. Then have the dialogue about their remaining humanity. That's when an exchange like that should be had, when the stakes are high. Have Maddox die from his injuries. Don't make Dr. Jurati a cold-blooded murderer, especially after an intimate relationship with Maddox. Rafi's call to Starfleet should have raised some red flags. After Soji scans everything she owns to determine the ages of the items, she should have scanned herself. The episode Nepenthe should have been 2 episodes. 1 episode with the Troy Rikers, and 1 with the La Serena family. Everything should have been given more room to breathe. Give Soji and Castra time to bond over their shared loss. Let the old crewmates take the time to sit around the conference table and hash out an answer. Let the La Serena crew have the time to bond over their shared situation. Make it a rescue mission for Space Legolas and Hugh. Have Hugh stay behind to cover his escape this time. Let Hugh die for something and not just get killed because he was in the way. As it stands, Hugh should still be alive. And finally, let Soji have just a moment with Data in the simulation in the final episode. Having father, of sorts, meet daughter, of sorts, would have expanded on the conversation that Soji and Picard were having about Data. Now, Soji can see for herself what kind of person Data was. This may have been Picard's scene, his goodbye to Data. The end of that relationship. But every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. Right? In organizing this review, the most overriding evident element is that the story is being subverted in order to fit into a particular formula of storytelling. And this seems to be the case for Star Trek Discovery as well. Let's compare those shows, Picard and Discovery, alongside the newer Kelvin time. Rearranged. And oftentimes that engineering is designed to include big nostalgic elements, like with Seven's inclusion in Star Trek Picard, which again doesn't feel needed in Picard. Picard's journey. It was contrived to include some nostalgia for Star Trek Voyager, and it does not fit in organically. So why are these elements so consistent across all the newer incarnations of Star Trek? Can't really say for certain, but we can speculate as to why this particular design is animating the current version of Star Trek. But our best bet lies